Well, Tucker Carlson is ripping Israel a new one. And he does it like day after day. Now, not a big fan of Tucker Carlson, but he has one super talent. Sort of like Trump has a talent of telling the rank and file disgruntled person something they want to hear. Tucker Carlson has a really good nose for figuring out where people are disgruntled is not the wrong word. Where they're dissatisfied is not a strong enough word either. Scapegoat, yes. Tucker Carlson knows how to find a scapegoat and just drill on it. And he recognizes that Israel is going to be a scapegoat. And the reason I want to talk about this is I feel I said this 3 years ago. I wrote an essay on Medium where I basically, because many of the stories I was writing at the time about Israel, many people who are pro-Israel were arguing with me, calling me an anti-Semite, all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to do an article where I'm saying, okay, I'm just going to play completely on Israel's side and explain why Israel is committing suicide a couple of years ago. And in the piece, I made the argument that Gaza was basically a siege. So Israel had built a wall around the Palestinians, and it was guarding. It's like a siege, keeping them in their sort of fortress and isolated. And they did this for 30 years. But even when they started building the wall, I thought even back then, I'm like, they better not forget about the Palestinians. I mean, they have to fix this. This is temporary. But it's one of these things you make temporary and then you forget, and then it comes back to bite you, which it did. So what Israel did is they basically built this, they built this electronic security system around the wall, and they dug it into the ground. And they said really sophisticated, and it's just basically a financial boondoggle. A lot of people got rich. The stuff didn't work. They put like 4 women in the tower, and they called it a day. Now, Israel's a very chauvinistic society, so putting 4 women in a tower is not their idea of this is something important to us. So Hamas didn't really get through the wall because they had gotten better and had more advanced equipment. They got through because Israel stopped paying to defend it. So, in other words, Israel could not afford the siege of Gaza. The other thing is that a lot of money went into Gaza from Europe and the United States, like the rest of the world, the Western countries, were paying to keep the poor Palestinians in food, whatever. And they stopped paying. So Israel didn't want to pick up the bill. So, that's just also a fundamental thing people have to realize is that when I see Palestinians, I just read very poor people that nobody wants to deal with. And it's the same thing whether they're in Gaza, the United States, Europe, wherever. Nobody wants to deal with poor people, right? So they couldn't afford the siege. So in my story, I said, okay, even if I'm totally behind Israel, so if you can't afford the siege, and we know you can't afford the siege because Hamas broke through your silly software security system, right? You didn't listen to the women who called you from the tower saying, something serious is going on here. No, you didn't pay attention to them. You can reach any place in Israel within 4 hours, yet it somehow took the IDF 24 hours to get down there. So this is a mess up on so many levels. But anyway, if you can't afford the siege, how are you going to afford an occupation? So I wrote that if Israel goes into Gaza, it's the end, because they're incurring a cost, a liability that they can't afford, and nobody else in the world is going to pay for. So Israel has basically blown up all these buildings, basically on the dime of the United States, blown up all these buildings, hospitals, universities, whatever, and then there's the snipers. I mean, it's just the whole thing is disgusting. And the video that Tucker Carlson did today was how the Israelis had basically destroyed a church, a Christian church in Gaza, and killed many of the people in it. And it's, again, this stuff hasn't been reported because from the Western point of view, from the United States and Europe, like Israel, like 4% of its economy, like 4% of everybody, I forget the statistic, but it's very high. It's like double or triple what other countries are, work in defense. They work in building drones and bombs and guns and special military equipment. They do software, a lot of it security software. So basically, it's sort of like a police state that sells police equipment around the world. And so anyway, they went into Gaza. You know, they're doing all this, and they're not really looking at the world like how, like the government didn't like the government was smart, right? It wouldn't have like done it so callously. And when IDF soldiers videotaped on their phone, like blowing up some building and then taking a hookah pipe, they would have blocked it. But they didn't. Like so many things are screwed up in Israel. And so they didn't block these kids from showing all these horrendous things that they're doing. And this is, you know, annoying everybody in the world. But the key part of, I believe, Israelis' delusion is that they think that they don't depend on the United States. Like I have an Israeli friend. I say, listen, without the United States, Israel's done. He's like, we don't need the United States. We don't need anybody. Really? I mean, can you grow your own food? Do you have your own steel mills? Do you have any oil and gas to run the steel mills? Like what? You're in the desert. You're in the crappiest part of desert in the whole Middle East. There's no oil. There's no anything. That's why it was given to you. You think Britain gave you Israel because there's something good there? No. It was between Israel and Africa. You chose Israel, but to them it was the same desert. So this whole delusion within Israeli society that somehow the United States is always going to need Israel, because basically the deal is that Israel is the hegemon in the region. It's like the stick to the Middle East oil, and the United States is a global power. And as long as Israel keeps everybody in the Middle East down, the United States will keep paying them. So when Israel went after the Palestinians in Gaza, their point of view is it's an internal problem. They're bothering us. They're not bothering you. I know it's distasteful, but just, you know, hold your nose till you're done. That was their idea. But they had no sense of, well, maybe that could go too far. But I'm drifting from the point. No sense of they don't have money and real power and natural resources to say no, to piss off their sponsor over and over and over again. And this happened in Israeli Jewish culture, the Maccabees going past. This isn't even new. I mean, the people talk about like the longest Israel's ever survived is a truly independent nation is 70 years, and will it make it this time? You know, stuff like that. So getting back to, let me check the time, 8 minutes. So let me get back to Tucker Carlson. So anyway, so I wrote that article. It was about how Israel is spending more money than it has. It is, and once it goes into Gaza, it can't afford to occupy it. So that's going to create a problem. And plus, there are all kinds of internal problems in Israel. In fact, my most read story on Medium was a story called Israel's More F Than You Know. And I didn't actually think anybody would read it because I put the F word in the title. I thought Medium's not going to show that to anybody. Over 100,000 people read it, enjoyed it. So it's, and I go into all these internal things. So just even on a good day, even on a really great day, Israel is always on the precipice of civil war and totally disintegrating because of all the various political factions and interests within Israel. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but you can go research it if you want. Take my word for it. So another argument I made a couple of years ago is that the way human psychology works is that when you screw up, you always look to blame somebody else. And this is the other thing that I find very fascinating and ironic about Israel. Because in Israel's mind, the whole problem with their country are the Palestinians. Even though they put them between a wall, they've got them basically in walls in the West Bank, they really do have control over the Palestinians. Sure, the Palestinians launch these Scud rockets, which are easy to shoot down. So really no Israelis have died in the past 30 years. Statistically, the number is like nothing compared to what they did in Gaza. But anyway, Israel, but they still blame us. The reason we're not growing, the reason we're not better, whatever it is, a sense of entitlement in Israel, because of course Israel looks at the United States and says, well, we should have everything they have. The sense of entitlement is so high that they're like, okay, it's your fault, the Palestinians. And that's what they've been doing. They've been taking it out on the Palestinians. But they don't do the math. They don't look a step above. I guess who of us does? In that, what's the United States doing? When the United States goes into a recession or depression, who is the United States going to blame? Is the United States going to blame itself? Is the United States going to say, oh, well, we shouldn't have started that war with Iran, we shouldn't have, that was a bad idea to start a war with Iran. We should really check ourselves. Or we shouldn't elect these idiots into our government. We shouldn't let so many idiots run our government. We should do something to get rid of them. No. Americans aren't going to think like that. They're going to blame somebody. And who's the best person at finding a scapegoat for Americans? Tucker Carlson. Yeah, he's the best. And he's found the scapegoat. The scapegoat that, again, I and others, I think, saw a couple of years ago. He's found Israel. He's found Jews. Now, he's not saying Jews, obviously, because the Jewish population in the United States is still strong and connected and has tons of money. He's not saying that. But that's where it's going to go. And I've said for a long time that American Jews are naive if they think it's not going to hit them, that they should have distanced themselves from the Zionists in the past couple of years, but they have not. But anyway, who knows whether that'll happen or not. But we can leave that question aside. Again, I'm certain Israel is going to be blamed. Israel is going to be the scapegoat. And Tucker Carlson is on that before everybody else. And everybody says, oh, well, AIPAC controls, whether people are primaried and this and that, and it's all the Jewish money. Yes. But it's limited. It's actually not that much. And you read about, they can do 100 million here, 200 million. That's nothing. Nothing in real power in the United States. And you have to understand that Tucker Carlson's family, he comes from WASP power. I'm talking about real power in the United States, not Hollywood. Yes, Hollywood is powerful in that it affects what we say and what we think. I'm talking about power like in the arms manufacturers, in the oil businesses in Texas, like Texas and Oklahoma. That white wasp power, that is real power, scary real power. And it's fine to go along with Israel, to sell its weapons to Israel, for Israel to beat up on the Middle East so it can sell oil service products or stuff like that from Texas or whatever. It's happy to do all that. But push comes to shove, it could not care less about Israel at all. It's just business. And the other thing is that many of the people who vote, of these Trump voters, are latent anti-Semites, real anti-Semitism. But Israel, and many people say that, somebody like me is an anti-Semite for criticizing Israel. So you get a lot of people, and this is the irony, a lot of people actually want Israel to succeed, as I did and do, calling us anti-Semites. But we're not really the problem. No. The real problem is that you're annoying everybody. Israel has to, and this is the other thing that I think Tucker Carlson is very good at, and Trump too, recognizing when you're weak. And even the Israelis recognize when they're weak. Like, part of the reason they're acting so crazy is they viscerally understand that we're getting weak. And so they're trying to get as much money as possible. Just think about it in your everyday life. If you're working for a company, you see it's going bankrupt, right? You're going to go out on more meals. You're going to expense more stuff, right? And you're going to maybe take some paper home from the copy room, whatever, right? When you recognize that something is going under. And that's what Israel's doing, because the United States is, in a sense, getting weak. But what they're doing is doing all that stuff eventually, just like in a job. Like, if you just lie low and don't take advantage, maybe you can wait it out and be okay. But Israel just keeps trying to steal from the United States, in a sense, right? So they're going to get fired. They are going to get fired. eventually, whether it's Trump or somebody else, is going to cut Israel off. They haven't right now because it's a sunk cost. Like the United States has put, Israel has so many weapons and everything, so many defense agreements. Like, yeah, it's a sunk cost. They don't want to get out of it. That's why they keep giving to Israel. But at some point, right, it's just like if you have a crackhead in your family, you got to just cut them off. And that's where we're going with Israel. So where am I at? 15 minutes. Again, I don't mean to bash on Israel, and I'm not here to bash on Jews or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's just so clear as day to me that Israel is going to be the scapegoat, and that Tucker Carlson, love him or hate him, recognizes a good scapegoat when he sees one, and is in early, and is going to make lots of hay doing this. And the Republican Party is going to follow, and the Democrats are going to follow. All Americans are going to follow. And it's just a train wreck of epic proportions. And don't get me wrong, it's not like the United States can come out of this well either. Like, you know, it's going to hurt, but just a much bigger country. You have a country of 300 million versus Israel's like a country of 9 million with 7 million Jewish people and no oil and no farmland really, no nothing. Yeah, it's not going to be good. And it's not going to be good, not because I'm analyzing a lot, just because I'm looking at the world's greatest recognizer of scapegoats for Americans, pointing his finger right at Israel.